All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for hopping on today for Making Multifamily Money. So I see some new faces here, which is great. So today I'm going to talk about how to vet a property manager. If you're taking the course, I have a couple modules on how to vet a property manager, as well as a kind of a questionnaire that you want to use when you're interviewing the property managers. So briefly, some context. Why should we use a property manager? So it helps you scale, right? So like, I wouldn't be able to work a full time W-2 and manage 90 units of apartment complexes if I didn't have a property manager, right? So if you want to be able to scale, if you want to have time freedom, if you want to have someone who's your boots on the ground, right? Like I'm in California and I have apartments in Oklahoma City, which is 6 hours away by flight. So, obviously, if there's issues, I cannot be there to manage that. So that's why it's very key to, find a property manager. What I emphasize quite a bit is if you have a good deal and a bad property manager, it becomes a bad deal because the property manager is managing your asset, right? So the way I view a property manager is, I bought an apartment for half a million. I basically put what is it, $125,000 down. So imagine you're giving $125,000 to a complete stranger, right? And they're gonna protect that money for you. And that's how I kind of view my property manager. Basically, they're managing my asset for me that I put all my hard-earned money into. So they better do it well, right? Like better than what I could have done myself. Um, so that's what's kind of key about property management. And what's also kind of nice too is, as I mentioned, it's really how you scale. They know the market more, and you want to surround yourself with smarter people than yourself, right? So the property manager should be smarter than you, and they should be telling you what to do, right? Like my property manager will tell me what renovations are needed for my apartment complex in Oklahoma City. That makes sense, right? Because what's popular in California may be overkill in Oklahoma City. So, my property manager told me that, medium gray paint is popular in the apartments. A dark wood color is popular. You don't need granite quartz countertops. You just need laminate for the showers. A bathtub kit is fine. You don't need like tile. In California, tile is very popular here. So, that's who you really rely on to tell you the specifics about that market. And once they kind of tell you, you kind of help understand your market. But the hard part is finding that great property manager, right? That like 9 out of 10, what I say in my course, 9 out of 10 property managers are bad. And once you found that one good property manager, you better treat them very well because they will manage your property. They will increase your NOI. So they're going to increase your income and decrease your expenses. And then your apartment's valued based on the NOI divided by the market cap rate. So as the NOI goes up, the value goes up, right? And then when the value goes up, that's when you can do your cash out refi, pull out your money, and then go buy more real estate. So that's what I mean by like once I have a good property manager, and fortunately I have a good one in Oklahoma City, like I can easily scale around them, and I actually kind of cater towards them a little bit. Like they're kind of not used to having an owner kind of let them do what they want, right? If they literally tell me, "Hey, we should paint it gray," I'm like, "Yeah, paint it gray." Like I literally am. All I do is they tell me what the renovations are, and I just say, "Hey, it looks nice." Like tell me how much it costs, and say it looks nice. But on the flip side, you have to really be knowledgeable enough to be able to vet property managers, right? Like you don't want to be completely clueless that someone is, bullshitting you for lack of a better word. Because when you start talking to a lot of property managers during the interview process, just like with any job, they're on their best behavior, right? And they're gonna be on their best behavior because they want your business, right? They want your business, they want your income, and they want to scale too. So that's the challenging part. So for all the students, I have a property management interview form, and I'll just kind of briefly go over it. But basically, I emphasize that the students interview, 10 to 20 property managers. First, you want to start with referrals. So hopefully, other investors in the market, and they can refer the property manager. And usually, when asking for a referral, I'll ask, what do you like about the property manager, and what can improve, right? Because obviously, if it's a referral, they're going to have a more positive spin on it. But that's why I like to ask, well, what can they improve on? And they might say like, oh, the property manager maybe takes 2 days to get back to them, or maybe they're not good with technology, so they're not good at taking photos, or whatever that feedback is. And most likely that's what you're going to be dealing with as well when you start working with them there. So kind of general questions for property management is, you want a property manager. I call them medium-sized property managers. So medium size is 400 to 1,000 units. And that's the sweet spot, because if they're less than 400, they don't have systems in place. They're mom and pop operators. But if they're above 1,000, then they're too large, right? So let's just say they manage 2,000 units, and you only have like a 20-unit apartment complex. They won't take you seriously, because you only own 20 units out of like 2,000 that they manage. So so you want that medium sweet spot where they have their systems in place. They have a maintenance person working there. They're using Appfolio, Buildium, Rent Manager. So that's kind of what I aim for to start. And what I kind of emphasize is that I want to grow together, right? So, maybe they're managing 1,000 units, and, I only own 20, but I want to make it known that down the road, I want to buy more real estate eventually. Like after I do the value add, I do a cash out refi, take the money out, then you go buy more real estate, right? So that's what I kind of emphasize. And then another question I like to ask the property manager is, kind of tell me about the market vacancy rate. And what's kind of nice about that question is it kind of helps you gauge what your vacancy will be for your apartment complex. So if the market vacancy rate is 15%, then most likely your apartment complex at best will be 15%. So that's what you can use to underwrite. And then what's also nice about that question too is it kind of tests their knowledge of their local knowledge, right? Do they actually really know that market better than you? Because a lot of like big property managements, maybe they have offices everywhere, but they don't really know the actual like neighborhoods in depth, right? So, like one of my property managers, their office is literally 5 blocks away from my 20-unit apartment complex. So like they can literally walk over there if I have any questions, or say, hey, can you take some pictures of the renovations for me? They literally walk over there during lunch and take photos for me. And I know that they know the market because they literally work there. Right. So that's another piece. And then another question I like to ask is, what's the eviction process and how much does that cost? So in the course, I emphasize you want to pick landlord friendly states. So like in Oklahoma, we do something called a 15/7 notice. So we give tenants 7 days to fix an issue. So I had one tenant that he was a hoarder, and he was letting homeless people into his unit to sleep and shower, which was causing a bed bug outbreak in the whole apartment complex, which costed me $10,000 to fumigate all 20 units. So we basically gave him a 7-day notice to, number one, stop allowing homeless people to enter his unit, and number two, to clean up, the mess. And, he didn't comply. So after 7 days, we went to eviction court and we basically won. And then he had 8 days to basically vacate from then. So that's how easy it is in Oklahoma. It took me 15 days to evict somebody. In California, it takes like 3 months just to get the ball rolling, and there's always a bunch of delays and things drag on. So like sometimes it can take like, 1 or 2 years to evict someone. I literally did that in 15 days and I got my keys. And in Oklahoma, they kind of know that, the eviction laws are very easy. So usually if you give an eviction notice, a lot of them, they just leave the moment I issue an eviction notice. So what's anyways, back to my question. I asked that question because it tests their knowledge, right? If they can explain to you what the eviction process looks like, then you also know how much it costs, right? So I know that it costs about $500 to evict somebody, and it takes me 15 days. So it's pretty simple. And then another question I like to do is like, how do you handle tenants who place constant repair requests? Because these add up, right? Like, let's just say every time a light bulb broke, a tenant would put in a request, and then the property manager will send someone in, and they charge a flat rate of whatever, $50 every time just to go there, plus like a markup on the supplies. So it adds up, right? And that can really jack up your expenses, which decreases your NOI, which decreases the value of the apartment complex. So you kind of want to know, what their process is, so you can kind of see how tenants are. Um, so, and then another kind of question that I like to ask is, um, I guess I like to ask if there's like a leasing fee involved with the property management. So, like, what are the fees? So, take it one step back. So, what are the fees? So, for apartment complexes, you range between 4% to 10%, depending on how many units you have. For my 20 unit and my 26 unit, I get about 7% to 8% of my gross rents for reference. But let's just say I own like a 50 to 100, then at that point, maybe you can get 4 to 6%. And then what I like to negotiate too is like if they manage like a couple of my apartment complexes, then you can kind of negotiate the next time you renew your contract to say, hey, you're now managing 50 units. Can you lower my property management fee from 7% to 6% or something like that, right? And then for me, I don't like the leasing fees. So some property management companies, when the lease is up or when they bring in a new tenant, they'll charge you like 50% of the first month's rent, or like a flat fee or a minimum fee, whatever that is. And I kind of don't like that. I try to negotiate that out of the contract personally, and I've been successful with that. And I don't really like that because, to me, like it's part of their job already, right? Like it should be part of their job to lease these units out, and I don't feel like I should have to pay you, half the rent or a flat fee to do that, right? Because I'm just paying you a flat percentage anyways. So sometimes what I do is to kind of give and take, I will take out the leasing fee, but then I'll increase the property management fee by like a percent to kind of create that win-win situation so that interests are aligned, right? So I've been able to do that. But then what I kind of noticed too is like kind of a pro tip here is a lot of single family home property managers, they charge a leasing fee. So if a property management company offers that, then usually they're more like managing single family homes. And managing single family homes is completely different than managing apartment complexes. Because single family homes, it's like of course you want to lower the expense and whatnot, but for apartments, like you're a lot more the property manager has to be a lot more cost conscientious because the value is directly correlated to your NOI, right? So it's a different mindset to like manage an apartment complex versus a single family home, and a different mindset to own a single family home um, versus an apartment complex here. So that's what I kind of do. And then another question I like to ask is there a setup fee? So some property management companies, like when they first take over a property, they might charge you like $200 per unit to set up, your account. And if you have like 20 units times $200, that's almost like $4,000. And that's insane, right? Like that's more towards single family home. Like, yeah, whatever, single family homes and getting more rent for my single family home, like $2,000. But for an apartment, I'm only like starting off in Oklahoma. Most of the rents were about 450 to 500. And if you charge me $200, that's literally half my rent just out the window for a setup fee. So like, to me, like I said, once again, like if they want your business, they should set you up with an account for free, right? Like just the nature um, of the business there. So that's just kind of one thing that I keep an eye on. And then another question I like to ask is, do they help with renovations? So some property managers, they will serve as your general contractor, and it's nice if they do that because it's a two-in-one for you, right? So not only will they tell you what renovations are needed, they'll also tell you like how much rent that will get you. So it kind of like involves one less person. So, it makes it a little easier, right? Like you can kind of go to them for everything. So for in terms of the general contracting as well as the property management. So that's the pro. And sometimes, they can charge you, general contracting fees about 5 to 10% of the total renovation costs. So my property manager charges me 5%, and my renovation budget's around like 200,000. So I'm going to pay him 5% of 200,000. And what's kind of bad about it is sometimes, like I said, a lot of property managers are bad, a lot of contractors are bad, and if you kind of have property manager and general contractor two in one, it's kind of easier to cheat you because you don't have systems in place. So like sometimes when the property manager and the general contractor are separate, I actually use my property manager to kind of cross check my general contractor. And how I do that is my property manager will actually go do an inspection every week before giving the weekly draws to the general contractor. So if the general contractor said, "Hey, I renovated unit number 4 and I put brand new flooring," my property manager's gonna go over there, take a look at unit number 4, and there better be flooring there before we pay you. And if there's not, then this general contractor is lying to us or is not telling the truth, right? So that's how I kind of check. I have my checks and balances, but if they're two in one, then at that point, you don't have that safety check. But who I use as my safety check in that situation is my lender actually does inspections to give me my renovation budget draws. So after, let's just say I fixed up unit number 4, the lender will send out an inspector to inspect unit number 4, and they do the scope of work checklist. So like, did you renovate the kitchen? Did you do the flooring? Did you do the bathroom? So then the inspector will go through that scope of work with my property manager / general contractor to validate it's done. And then once it's done, the lender will then give me my renovation budget or my renovation draw. So there's other ways to, verify your property manager who also serves as a general contractor. But as you can kind of see, the theme is you want to have your checks and balances in place. And it's very important because, like, I'm not in Oklahoma, right? So, like, if the apartment was in Southern California, I could kind of pop in once in a while to do the checks and balances. But since I'm far away, I have to kind of rely on a third party to do that for me. So, and I guess another kind of thing with property management is kind of one key point I like to emphasize is you want to tell them your exit strategy so that they know how to pivot and they see that if they align with you, right? So for me, I'm buy and hold. So for me, I buy a property, I increase the value through forced appreciation, and then I'm going to do a cash out refi, pull up my money, and then keep it as a buy and hold, right? So like if you tell them that you want to keep this long term, they're going to give you different recommendations for a long-term buy and hold versus somebody who's like a fix and flip. So let's just say I wanted to fix this up and then sell it for a quick profit. Then obviously their strategy and how fast they go will kind of vary with that. So you want to make it clear what your exit strategy is. So I have like one property that has a hard money loan on it. And, I'm paying 10% interest on the apartment complex as well as a renovation. And it's only a 12-month term. So like I told them, like, can you finish this renovation in 12 months? Because if I need to extend it, I have to pay an extension fee. So they usually charge me like 1 or 2 points to extend another 3 months, right? But then for me, my goal is I want to finish this renovation in 6 months to give me cushion and then do a cash out refi, get permanent financing on this loan and pull out my money. So if you make it clear that, hey, I'm paying high interest rate, I have a hard money loan, it's only good for a year, then, they can kind of map out a timeline in their mind, as well as, what the process is for renovation. So like I tell my contractor, hey, like I have to front the money first. And then once you completely finish, the lender is going to send an inspector there to inspect the scope of work, and then they'll reimburse me afterwards. So like, hopefully you finish one unit at a time versus like, you just finish like 5 units in a batch, which is what most property managers do. So what's unfortunate is I have to front like $100,000, and then once all 5 units are done, I get them all inspected and I get reimbursed my $100,000. So that's the reality. I mean, ideally, I want like, you finish a unit for $20,000, I get inspected, I get my $20,000 back, and then I put that $20,000 into the next unit, right? That's the ideal world, but that doesn't happen. But you want to set that expectation up front with like your property manager and general contractor. And then another one is, obviously it's very obvious, but you want to set your expectations clear with your property management in terms of what you expect in terms of a weekly basis and a monthly basis. So for me, I actually have a weekly accountability report that I give in my course. It's a bunch of metrics related to the net operating income. So like, how much money did we rent, collect? What's our expense for the week? A weekly update. How many units need to be turned? How many units are rent ready, being advertised? How many tenants are going to leave or gave a notice? What's the renovation status of the unit if they're doing your renovations? So basically, it's just a weekly accountability report. It's due every Friday. Um, and why I do that is because it takes about 3 to 6 months to know if your property manager is good or bad. Like you can do the interview, you can have referrals, but like honestly, property management is a crapshoot. Um, it takes 3 to 6 months before you even know if they're good or bad. That's unfortunate. Like even if you did all your due diligence, you don't know if they're good or bad until you work them for 3 to 6 months. So um, what I try to negotiate in the contract is the standard contract's 12 months, but I actually negotiate down to I ask for 3 months, and then after that I'll do an automatic extension if they're good, right? And why I want 3 months is I basically want to test them. It's a probation period, but a lot of them will push back and say, "Oh, let's do 6 months," which is fine too. So most of mine, I end up having a 6 month contract, and I tell them up front, like, "Hey, we're doing business for the first time together. Let's date before we get married. So let's just start with a 6 month contract because maybe you don't like working with me either, right? It goes both ways. So, but I just said that, but if it works out, then obviously I want to work with you long term and I want to scale with you as well. So, I usually have no issues getting a 6 month contract negotiated. And then I actually write in the contract that they must send me my weekly accountability report every Friday. And then every Friday, we'll have a quick, 10-minute phone conversation discussing those weekly metrics. And then what I do is like, for the first month, it might be weekly. And then the next month, it'll be every 2 weeks. And then after that, once you build trust, it's going to be monthly calls with them. And then maybe if you do it once a month, it might be like a 30-minute phone conversation. But I make it very clear that it's supposed to be quick. It shouldn't be too time consuming. And if they're doing their job, like these metrics are easy, right? It's not like it's like 10 metrics that I have them report out to me. And it kind of helps them keep track of too, like they're managing so many other properties. So that's why I make my expectation clear up front that like if you want to work with me, I have weekly reports that you must give to me. And then on a monthly basis, if they have Buildium, AppFolio, or Rent Manager, pretty familiar with all three of them. So Rent Manager, you can actually automate the reports. The property manager can automate the reports for you so that like if you want minimum you want a rent roll and a profit and loss statement for that month. And then they can also do like delinquency reports, accounts receivable. It's like almost like 20 reports, but they can actually automate it. So it sends to your email every month. So like for me, like for example, on the third week of September, I get my reports for August. But like sometimes like why I like the weekly reports is like I get stuff in real time versus like let's say I got my weekly report or my monthly report end of September for something in August, like it's already been 7 weeks before I was able to take action, right? So that's why I like the weekly accountability reports to start off. And to be honest, like if they got used to doing it, I just let them do it eventually until they asked me like, "Hey, Steven, can we stop doing this weekly accountability report? The property's more stabilized." So I make that very very clear up front. That's the explanation. And I'll show them what the report looks like. And then for AppFolio, AppFolio is kind of nice. It's a little more expensive than Rent Manager, so a lot of property managers don't really use that one. But they can actually customize reports for you, like however you want it formatted. They can customize that. And then Buildium, same thing. So AppFolio is probably number one, Buildium's two, Rent Manager's three, if you were to rank them. So yeah, you want to have them explain like what software they're using and like when you should expect these reports. And I think that's kind of off the top of my head, like how I kind of vet my property manager. So what I do is like I'll interview about 10 to 20 property managers. So I'll take the referrals first, but then I just literally Google it. I just type like Oklahoma City property manager, and then they just list a bunch of them, and you just start calling them. And what's kind of nice is it's kind of tedious at first, but like just by talking to all these property managers, it kind of teaches you about the market as well, right? So after talking to 20 property managers, I felt like I knew the area very well, without even ever stepping foot there yet. And what's kind of nice too about like if you have a good property manager, like they'll tell you if it's a bad area, right? So like I literally, not too long ago, I had I think a 50 unit apartment complex in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I think they wanted like $2 million for that. I negotiated seller financing with 10% down, and then that 10% down payment was 5% at the close of escrow and 5% year one. And based on the numbers of that apartment, like the cash flow would have covered the second 5%. So essentially, I'm only in 5% down, and I basically got this 50 unit apartment complex at 40K per unit, and in Tulsa it averages 60K per unit. So I thought it was gonna be a killer deal, right? I was like, man, I'm gonna get this deal with like essentially like 100K down. I had a line of credit for 100K, and then the next 100K, like the cash flow would probably cover the next 100K that I had to pay. I had 5% interest only, and it was a 5 year balloon. So I had basically 5 years to execute my value add plan, and then get permanent financing on this. So I thought I hit a home run. Like this is through one of my letters, but I brought it to my property manager, and then the property manager told me, "Oh, you know the nickname of that area is?" And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Oh, it's called Homicide Alley." So at that point, they're like, even if you paid us like 20% property management fee, we would not take this property because there's so much crime there, there's so much headaches there, and the tenant base is not gonna be the greatest. So once I found that out, it kind of bursted my bubble. I thought I'd negotiate this amazing deal, but I ended up being in a really terrible area, a Class D neighborhood, and I don't want to invest there anyways. So that's what's really nice about having a really really strong property manager is they can save you time, right? Like if I literally just brought the deal to my property manager right out the gate, I just would have moved on from the deal, right? Or sometimes the property managers like they're like, oh, I manage an apartment like 2 miles away from there, so these are the rents, or they can kind of give you that insight. So to me, like you have a good property manager when they're teaching you, right? They should be teaching you things about the area, like what's popular in that market. So like I said, once you find that 1 out of 10 that's good, then you want to treat them very well. So, it goes both ways. And, a lot of property managers, like, it's their job, right? They're very proud of what they do. And, like, you don't want this owner to, like, tell them what to do. I mean, at the end of the day, we pay the bills, right? So, as the owner, even though the property manager says, hey, laminate countertops are good, I'm like, I want quartz on all my units. They're going to listen to me, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm the owner, but they really appreciate it when like you actually listen to their input and value their opinion, right? That's just basic management in general, right? Regardless of what field it's in. Um, so like once they kind of see that like you actually trust their opinion, like they kind of like working with you, right? And kind of another pro tip here is a little off topic too, is like my property managers, because they like working with me so much, they bring me off market deals. So like they're managing like 1,000 units, right? Property managers are the first people to know if an owner wants to sell. So if the owner of, let's say, another 50 unit that they're managing wants to sell, they're going to bring it to me to take a look at. And what's nice is like, because they're already managing it, they'll send me the reports, they'll send me the rent roll, they'll send me the T12, they'll tell me about the property, they'll tell me what needs to be fixed, and it's a win-win situation, right? Like, the deal of transition, like when you transition from owners, they usually have new property management come in. You don't have to deal with unknowns because, like in commercial real estate, brokers can completely bullshit you, and there's no protections in place, right? They can give you a fabricated rent roll, they can give you a fabricated T12, they can give you fake pictures of the property, and when you take over, you might find something completely different. So if they're already managing it, they already kind of, it helps protect you from that, right? Because they can really give you the inside details of what's good, what's bad, and what needs improvement, right? And then the property managers like it too, because a lot of them act as brokers as well. So they get paid their 3% whatever commission, and I'll happily pay someone 3% if they bring me a good deal, right? So usually, if property managers are bringing you off market deals, it's a good deal, and then it saves you on marketing, right? Like I spend $600 a month on marketing, and all the students that join the course, they spend about $600 a month on mailers, between PropStream and Yellow Letters Complete. So like if you can get a deal without sending mailers, that saves you money in your pocket right there. So that's what's kind of nice about having a good relationship with a property manager, kind of based off of my experience. So overall, I just wanted to give like a really high level overview of how to vet a property manager. I feel like a lot of people that reach out to me, they self manage and they just have that fear of like letting go. But for me, I have no choice, right? Like I literally have no option to self manage because I'm buying remotely. But a lot of people have that fear of just kind of letting go of that piece. And in reality, if they do the job 80% as well as you should delegate. But if you hire correctly, they should be doing your job better than you, right? So that's kind of the mindset that I have. And, also what I emphasize to all my students is that, like, you got to have a backup, at least three backup property managers. So I rank I interview 20, I rank one, two, and three, right? And I list a reason why I like this one, why this one's one, why this is two, why this is three. And then basically at that point, if the first property manager is bad, then you want to start engaging your second property manager on your list to say, hey, I'm working with this property manager, it's not working out, and this is why it's not working out. Like, can I want to bring you on to take over on this date, right? So, that's why you gotta have a backup, or sometimes life happens, right? Like maybe death, disability, divorce, whatever, there can be a situation. So you always want to have a backup in place for everything. So that's why I always tell my students, you gotta have at least three of everything. Three property managers, three contractors, three mortgage brokers, three lenders, three everything. Everything you need, you have three of for everything, so that um, you're covered and protected there. So yeah, hopefully you guys found this helpful. I guess I'll open it up to some questions now, to the audience as I read these comments. Any questions for me? Okay, so no questions. So yeah, I see a question from Gary here. So like, just know that when you negotiate contracts, everything's negotiable. Everything is literally negotiable. Like the term, you can negotiate it down. I've done it from 12 months to 6 months. I've gotten rid of leasing fees. I've gotten um, what is it, the percentage down. I've literally negotiated everything, right? And as long as you're just reasonable about it and explain why, like they want to work with you, right? Like as long as you're a really reasonable person. Question from Charmaine: do you see all your properties? Um, so for my first apartment complex in Oklahoma City, my 26 unit, I was actually there for the unit inspection. So I had a 1 day unit inspection. For reference, it took three guys 8 hours to inspect all 26 units. And I always tell my students, you want to inspect all units. Like, don't be cheap. Inspect all 26 units. If you have 26 units, you inspect 26 units. If you have 100 units, you inspect 100 units. So, because a lot of times what they do is they'll say, hey, I have 100 units. You want to sample 20? And like to me, that's like, you want to protect yourself, right? Like, it costs money, but like, what was if they inspect 20 good units and then they have like 20 burned down units? And then I'm renovating a burned down unit right now. It costs like $50,000 to renovate a burned down unit between pulling all the permits and whatnot. And imagine like you didn't inspect like 20 units that are burned down. That's going to increase your capex significantly, right? But if you inspect all 100 units, you can not only negotiate seller financing or no, seller repair credit to lower your down payment, but at least you know going in what to expect, right? And that's what's key. It's like there's so many unknowns in multifamily. You want to limit how many unknowns there are. And even despite doing inspections of all 26 units, you're going to be surprised every time. So for the first inspection, I was there. And honestly, like I'm no expert in terms of like, inspect like renovations and all that. For me, I just really wanted to meet my team. So I met my property manager there who was there during the inspection. They should be there. I had my contractor there who was also my property manager. And then I had the inspectors there. And then what you do is I follow the lead inspector like a shadow. I'm literally his shadow. And what I'm doing is like, I'm trying to see what he looks for and how he thinks so that I know what questions to ask, right? It's kind of like a free, not free, I'm paying for it, but like a free mentoring session on how inspectors look and think. Now you can ask them questions, right? Like they usually inspect the water heater, and then I'll ask like, hey, how many years do you think that water heater lasts before I can replace before it needs to be replaced, right? And then he'll say, oh, it's good for another 4 years. And I know water heaters in Oklahoma cost around $800 to replace. So I know in 4 years I'm gonna have to replace that water heater, $800, right? And then he'll look at the electrical panel. He's like, oh, this is recalled. And I'm like, okay, like, well, what does that mean? He's like, oh, well, this electric panel is recalled due to a safety fire hazard, right? Like most likely. And then what that tells me is like, okay, I need to replace that because my insurance will not. The insurance inspector is going to see that and say that, oh, it's a fire hazard. It's too risky. You got to fix this before we give you insurance, right? So right out the gate, I know that like I need to fix the electric panel. How much does that cost, right? So I know it's about $1,000 to replace that electrical panel with a newer one, right? And also, also when you're there too, you have your general contractor, your property manager, right? You say, hey, like, how much does it cost to fix this unit up? Like, what do I need to do? And they'll give you quotes at that point there as well. So for me, the first one you should definitely be there to learn. But to be honest, my 20 unit, my second one I bought, because I knew the area already and I knew my team, I didn't go there for that one. I literally bought that one sight unseen. I've been in the area, but I didn't actually wasn't in the apartment. But to kind of mitigate that, because I'm a little more experienced now, but like I had my property manager actually just film videos during the inspection, and the inspection reports they usually have a lot of photos in general, but I literally had my property manager like hold a camera and just like walk the whole apartment complex, each unit, inside, outside, everything, so that I felt like I was there, and then I could kind of like ask questions while I was like on camera, right? So that's what I did for my second one. But definitely for your first deal, you should definitely be there. For your second deal, it's up to you at that point. It depends on your comfort level. But and then in terms of visiting the apartments, I haven't visited them yet. But obviously, if I like buy more in that area, like I'm gonna visit all my properties. Right, if I have to go back to Oklahoma to scope out this new 50 unit I want to buy, of course I'm gonna check my 20, my 26 unit there. But for me, I just periodically ask for like my property manager to just to walk around with a camera and just like record it. Or if you want to have a legitimate third party, like you can literally go on like Facebook Market and just pay someone like $50 to say, hey, can you just like walk around this apartment complex and hold a camera and record it to see if how things look, right? So there's other ways to kind of view your property about being there. So hopefully that answers your question there. But yeah, definitely initially, if it's a new market, I go like let's say I bought an apartment complex in Tennessee, I'm gonna go there for my first one, but my second one I may not, right? So it just really depends. Obviously, if I'm retired from my W-2, then I'd probably go to all of them. But right now, I still work W-2, so that's why I don't go right now. Um, yeah. So I went to, I for the first 30 minutes, I did talk about all the questions I asked my property manager. My course, I give all the students a kind of an interview questionnaire. It's like 10, 12 questions that they go through. And then I kind of give the rationale as to why the questions. But if you rewatch, once it's uploaded on YouTube, the first 30 minutes, I go over all the questions I ask property management and then why I ask it. What's the rationale behind it? So just watch the recap there later. Yeah, yeah. So the curriculum's it's A to Z. So I really mean it because like I've done it myself, right? I've done it pretty recently. So like as I went through it, like I my nature is I ask a lot of questions. So literally all the questions I ever asked from start to finish of getting an apartment complex, I like put that into my course and all that, so that like it kind of covers all the bases. And I'm still learning to this day, so that's when I kind of add on to it and add more stuff based on my experience. But for me, like I said, property management is so key. Like they make or break your business. Like when you buy your first apartment complex, and let's just say you get fleeced by your first property manager, like it puts such a sour taste in your mouth that you don't want to buy real estate anymore, right? Like you want to make your first apartment complex experience a pleasant experience, so that if it's not pleasant, then you don't want to buy any more real estate, right? It leaves that sour taste in your mouth, right? Like I tried opening a stupid Amazon e-commerce store, and I lost like $10,000 when they're supposed to make me money drop shipping, and it left such a sour taste in my mouth that I hate e-commerce now. I hate e-commerce, right? so um, so you want your first experience to be as pleasant as possible. So so screening tenants. So great question. So like I self manage my single family homes in California, but my property managers will screen my tenants in Oklahoma. So I have insight on both. So when I screen my tenants for single family homes, I usually just ask like, tell me about yourself. Like, what's your job? What's your family? Why are you moving? And if they answer all those questions, I'll say, well, I need to see 3 months of bank statements, 3 months of pay stubs, credit score check on Experian. So I don't do a formal application for me personally. Um, and knock on wood, I haven't had someone burn me just yet. But I keep it pretty simple. Sometimes they'll just log into their Chase account, show me how much money they have in their bank account. I just want to verify how much income they have. And if I do Section 8, what I do is my pro tip here is that I'll actually bring the contract to their house for them to sign, and they think it's nice of you because like, hey, you're actually driving to my house to bring the contract to sign. But in reality, my ulterior motive is I want to see how their current apartment looks, because if it looks clean, then that's how your apartment's going to look when they move in. But if it looks like it's dirty and filthy and you come unannounced, then you will know that your apartment will be dirty. So that's how I do it. But for apartment complexes, most property managers, they make them do like an application, and the application entails a hard credit inquiry. They have to upload their bank statements, their pay stubs, and then they usually make them do like a landlord referral. So it's just like an application process, and you can ask your property manager you're working with, like, well, how do you screen tenants, right? Like, what's your process look like, so they can kind of teach you as well as to what they do and kind of what to expect if like there's a vacancy or something. Um, so hope that answers your question. It sounds kind of dumb, but yeah, I kind of delegate it over to the property management for apartment complexes. Um, for the property management, so yes, it was a referral from Peter Harris there. So he did refer me his property management that he gave me. So what's nice about them is they specialize in renovations, and I think they're managing about 400 units right now, and um, they actually are managing about 400 renovations. So that's quite a bit, right? So managing 400 renovations is pretty cumbersome. So like, what's kind of nice too is like when you work with a property manager, you want to work with one that aligns with your exit strategy. I kind of forgot to mention this earlier. So let's just say like if you need to do a value add where you have to do a lot of renovations, you want to work with a property manager who has done a lot of renovations and helped a lot of investors do cash out refinances, right? So it's okay to ask them like, hey, have you actually helped um, an investor do basically a big burr on steroids is what I call it. Um, so, like ask them like, hey, like, have you helped an investor go from start to finish, take over, renovate, and then do the cash out refi and continue to hold, right? It's okay to ask them. If they've done that like 5 or 6 times, then most likely they have that experience and skill set so that they can do it with your apartment complex. So, that's just another question that you definitely, should ask as well, right? And ask them like, hey, like, can you show me some pictures of some prior renovations that you've done, right? Oh, can you give me references from the other landlords that you helped execute the full cash out refi for, so I can talk to them, right? So when you get the contact, you can ask like, hey, like, what did they do well? What did they not do well, right? So it's always nice to have these checks and balances for you there. So another great question there. Any other questions? No, so quiet crowd today. Um, Okay, yeah, renter's insurance. So another great question. For me personally, I prefer renter's insurance because it just adds another layer of protection for you. So, like, let's just say like the unit above me flooded and it destroyed my laptop and my TV or whatever. Then at that point, your renter has insurance to get back recover some of that loss. You have insurance, right? And you must buy replacement cost insurance. I have a whole module about insurance and what insurance to get. And then above that, you have an umbrella insurance policy over all your properties, right? So that's three layers of protection. Plus, you have your LLC, so you have four layers of protection, right? But it really depends. Like, to be honest, in my 26 and my 20 unit, they don't require renter's insurance. It's optional for people. But usually in A-class apartment complexes where you allow pets, usually renter's insurance is required. Because let's just say I walk down the hall and my neighbor's dog bites my arm and it gets infected and I need to go to the doctors or the hospital. Then, so usually if they allow pets, so we don't allow pets at our apartments, then usually they require renter's insurance to protect against that liability. So renter's insurance is not that expensive. It's like a couple, like $200-300 a month. And there's some companies that will actually like finance it for them. So like it might just be like a monthly payment of like, 10-15 bucks, right? So there's a way to get it. So that's another question I asked my property management, like, what are your thoughts on renter's insurance? And usually the answer is, well, it's optional for them. But obviously, if you're allowing dogs and cats, then I would make it mandatory at that point to protect you from that liability there. So yeah, another great question. So to answer it, ideally yes, but reality is, like I said, C-class apartments. Sometimes the tenants don't want to pay for the extra cost. And what's kind of nice too is like you can kind of partner with a renter's insurance company and they can give you a little bit of the piece of the pie, right? So they can be like, well, you're referring all these renter or clients to us, we'll give you like 30% of the renter's insurance. So then that is another way to increase your income, which increases your NOI, which increases your value, right? So that's another value add strategy that you can implement there. So another great question there. Any other questions? No. So I guess another topic I didn't really touch base on, like how much time do I spend on a weekly basis? Um, so with property management, to be honest, during renovations, I have about a weekly touch base call, at least, usually around 30 to 40 minutes, giving me updates. Once the apartment's more stabilized, it's like once a week, once a month for like 30 minutes, and we have ad hoc as needed. So like it doesn't really require that much of my time. And I'll be honest, like I'm managing 90 units myself, and I'm becoming more forgetful to be honest, because like it's hard to keep track of 90 units. So I do rely on them to kind of refresh me. So Todd, creative financing, yeah. So I did a whole session explaining creative financing on my YouTube channel. So I can link that to you later. But basically, at a high level, there's basically three ways for creative financing. So the first method is seller carry first or seller financing. So that's when the seller becomes the bank. So in order to do that, the property must be owned free and clear. So so typically when I get off market deals, let's just say I get the P&L, I get the rent roll, and they want too much money for the deal. Let's just say they want $3 million for the deal, but it's worth $2 million. At that point, the bank's not going to finance me, right? And I don't want to overpay for the property. But if they own the property free and clear, and they're willing, I'll give them their price of $3 million if they give me my terms. Like I don't care about price with seller financing. I just care about my terms, right? So what are my terms, right? I have something called the 10-5-5 rule. So 10% down, 5% interest only, and then 5-year term, and that's all negotiable, right? Like that's just where I start. But you can do 20% down, you can do 5% down, you can do 20-year term, you can do 4% interest, whatever, right? Like if you're overpaying a property by, if I'm going to overpay a property by $1 million, then you better give me 5 to 0% down, very low interest rates in a long term, right? So that's what's beautiful about creative financing is you can literally negotiate everything, right? So seller carry first is pretty. It's only if it's owned free and clear about debt, and then there's seller carry second. So seller carry second, they still have debt on it, and they have a decent amount of equity. And what's nice about seller carry second is all it does is it helps lower your down payment with an actual lender. So what seller carry second means is like you get another bank involved. So that bank is in the first lien position. So they're in the first lien position to be protected, right? And then after that, the seller is in a second lien position after the lender. So what that means is like if let's say if I file bankruptcy, the first lien position gets all their money first, and then the second lien position gets whatever's left over. So let's just say they gave me $100,000, but what's left over is $50,000. Then the second lien position lost $50,000. So they're in a riskier position being in second, and that's why you usually get to pay them a higher interest rate, like maybe like 8 to 10% to get that. But what's nice about seller carry second is that you can help lower your down payment. So let's just say you get the down 30%, but they seller carry second 10%. Now your down payment's only 20%. So you're more leveraged, right? But the downside about this is that even though the seller is in second lien position, you still need approval from your lender that it's okay, if it's okay to have the seller carry second and how much and what interest rate, because they want to make sure that the debt service coverage ratio is greater than 1.25. So what I kind of teach in my course is, let's just say you analyze a deal normally without seller carry second and the debt service coverage is 1.6. So at that point, you know you have wiggle room, right? So you can say, okay, the seller is carrying second 10% at 8% interest. Then you bake that into your underwriting, and then now your debt service coverage ratio is, let's say, 1.3, right? And that's above the 1.25 threshold. At that point, this is exactly what I tell my loan officer when I pitch it is, hey, the owner wants to seller carry second 10% at 8%. The terms will match the balloon of your terms. So if the balloon's 5 years, then the seller carry second term will be 5 years to match or longer. And despite that, I'm still making the debt service coverage ratio is still greater than 1.25. It's a 1.3. And this is how I underwrote it. That's how lenders think. All they care about is a debt service coverage ratio. And then if you pitch that and they understand it, then they'll pitch it to the underwriting team. That's how you get seller carry second. So I've literally done this on a mobile home / RV park that I had under contract in Oklahoma. Like he was willing to allow the seller to carry second 10%. So I like to come. They require 30% down. He carried 10. I would need 20% out of pocket, right? But then unfortunately, that deal fell through for due diligence reasons. But that's proof that I've done it, right? I literally use that negotiation tactic to get seller carry second. And the last option is called subject to or master lease agreement. They're interchangeable. So subject to is more towards single family homes, and master lease agreement is towards apartment complexes. It sounds a little more sophisticated, right? Master lease agreement. But basically what it is they're transferring the deed name from the prior owner to you as a new owner, and you negotiate the down payment, what your monthly payment is, and what the term is, right? So master lease agreement is good for distressed owners. So let's just say that like they have a loan on the property, and like, so this is the most common situation where I pitch master lease agreement, and I go over these situations more in depth in the course and on the other YouTube video that I have. But let's just say my parents owned an apartment complex. They're managing it, and then they passed away, and I'm the kid that inherits the property. I don't know what to do, right? So like, you don't know what to do. Your parents were self-managing it, and at that point, like, I'm not managing it well. You know, people aren't paying rent, nothing's getting fixed. It's a distressed property, right? Let's just say it was 90% occupied, and when I took over management, it's 50% occupancy. At that point, like, no lender will lend me on this deal unless it's a hard money loan, right? So like, I have to get a hard money loan on this deal. And then, you know, this person is stressed out, right? Because they don't want to deal with the day-to-day management. Like, that's not what they want to do, right? They just want money. Like, they don't want to deal with anything. They just want money. They want to be relieved of operations. So, and then also since the property's distressed, like they might have bought it for like 2 million at full occupancy, but now that it's at 50% occupancy, like it might be only worth like 1.5 or $1 million. So if they sell it, they're at a loss, right? They can't even cover their loan. So that's when you kind of pitch the master lease agreement, and basically they continue paying their lender as usual, but then you will pay them. So it's kind of like usually you work with a third party servicing agency, like an escrow account, where like you put the money into that third party servicing agency, and then they will pay the owner, and then the owner will pay the lender like usual, right? So that's kind of how the train of the money flows. Um, so yeah, master lease agreement is probably the most complex way of creative financing, but it more applies to more like distressed situations. And when you do it, you must know your plan, right? Like you must know exactly what needs to be done to make sure that you get permanent financing on it. And kind of one concern that people have with master lease agreement is the due on sale clause. So technically, they transfer the title from their LLC to my LLC, but they're continuing to pay the lender as usual, right? So usually lenders don't care as long as they get paid, right? But if you work with a smaller mom and pop, community local banks, they might catch that the deed was transferred from this owner to you, and that they might trigger the due on sale clause. But to kind of, if you're in that situation, it's pretty rare. It just requires a conversation with the lender, right? With the president of the bank usually. And usually you'll say, hey, I'm Steven. I'm taking over management of this distressed asset. This current owner, this is what happened. Their dad passed away. The son couldn't manage it. The occupancy dropped from 90 to 50%. The T12 doesn't look good. So I'm coming in. This is my experience. I own 90 units. I've done value add real estate before. This is my track record. And this is my plan for this, right? Like you'll get your payments, right? So just work with me until I finish my value add plan. And I'm going to do a cash out refi with another bank or with you guys if you want to, give me a good loan, right? So that's what it just requires, a conversation. And another kind of thing, if you do a master lease agreement, is on the insurance, you have to list yourself and the current owner or the previous owner as well. So basically your LLC. So let's say I'm Stephen LLC and then there's John LLC. Then both Stephen and John LLC must be on the insurance policy that you get. So it's a pretty deep topic. I think in my course I have I think that module has the most lectures. It's a pretty complex topic, and I throw out a lot of the contract agreements that I've used, but it varies per state there. So hopefully that answers your question there, Todd. Like I said, I have a whole video where I think I talked about it for like 40 minutes on my YouTube channel for creative financing. So hope that answers that question. That was a lot of information I threw at you there. So yeah, please watch it again, watch it multiple times. That's why I record this. So I have about 2 minutes left. So thank you everyone for hopping on today and for asking questions. Once again, all these are recorded. I know I go kind of fast, but I record it for that reason. And if you're interested in, who I use for PropStream, who I use for Yellow Letter Complete, and even if you have questions in regards to my course and the mentorship program, just send me an email, and I'd be happy to kind of give you more details about that. But overall, I hope that this provided you a lot of value and makes you more comfortable in terms of how to vet your property management. So next 2 weeks, I'm out of the country, so there won't be sessions the next 2 Wednesdays, but then I'll be back first week of October. So I'll send out an email as well, but I will be overseas for the next 2 weeks. So once again, thank you so much, and see you guys in 3 weeks.